The relationships that we have are in our lives are incredibly important. They're one of the most important things in our well-being, and there have been so many research studies now that show that the quality of the relationships we have directly impact our longevity in our life. There was a recent Harvard research document that said that the stronger social ties and connections we have, the better we promote our brain health later on in life. And there was an Australian piece of research that showed that the stronger social connections we have, that we're 22% less likely to die. So the relationships we have around us are really, really important. They're really key for our health, for our well-being, for generally how we feel. And we know that loneliness is one of the biggest killers. So making sure we've got good, solid, strong relationships around us is absolutely prevalent in terms of our health and our well-being. However, the quality of those relationships is really down to our personal responsibility, and that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So the first thing to note is that the most important relationship that you have is the one that you have with yourself, and that the relationships that you have around you are a direct mirror image of the relationship you have with yourself. So really the first piece of work that we need to do is about on healing yourself, on healing anything that might be holding you back from really having those deep, fulfilling, loving relationships that we all yearn for in life around us. So really looking at ourselves and looking within rather than looking externally to be fulfilled is absolutely important. And once we change our energy and we start to shift the energy that we have, we attract the right energy towards us. So really, there's the old adage of to meet a partner, we must love ourselves first and be happy first. And it's exactly the same with friendships and other relationships too. Really doing the work to love who we are, to accept ourselves, and to be fully clear on who we are and happy, then relationships start to get attracted in because people want to be around us. So the most important relationship that you have is the one with yourself, and I think it's really important here to note that being an adult is really going to help in making sure that we're doing our healing and doing our work and being our best selves. That means that we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to make sure that we're really taking a look at how we are behaving, who we are, what our expectations are, and are we being reasonable and fair? And what are the painful bits? What parts of our life keep playing out? What habits are we having and coming up in life and in our relationships? How are they playing out, and how therefore do they need to be healed? What work can we do on healing and on loving who we are, so that we are healing any old trauma or pain that might be preventing us from moving forward in our relationships? Rather than blaming others and looking to others to help us heal, we really need to look within. Looking at the dark parts of ourselves, looking at our shadow self. Carl Jung said to reach enlightenment, we really do have to do our internal dark work, looking at our shadows, looking at the bits about us that we don't like, to find out who we really are, and so that we can see what other people see, because we need to be able to know this stuff. We need to know who we are so that we attract the kind of relationships that we want into our life. So it's really important that we do our own work, and I think the Cartman drama triangle is a very, very powerful tool in looking at how we play out in relationships. So there are the three roles in the triangle. There's the rescuer, there's the persecutor, and there's the rescuer, the persecutor, and the victim. And what we're playing through all of those three roles many times during the day, and it's really important to note where they might be coming up more often. What might we go to? What are our default settings in terms of, are we persecuting people? Are we giving people a hard time? Are we constantly nagging at our partners for doing things that we're not happy with? Or are we constantly feeling fed up in our relationships where we're not feeling that our needs are being met and attacking the people around us? Are we blaming people for things that really are our responsibility? and victim is, do we feel like we're constantly being blamed for things? Do we or constantly say, oh, well, it's not my fault, or I feel like I'm being blamed for things? Are we actually moving into our power in our relationships and taking full responsibility? And then rescue, are we trying to save people when really it's not our responsibility to save them? So, really looking at being there for people and supporting them with empathy, but not trying to save people because we're not comfortable with the situation that they're in. So we really must respect people's life choices and the way that they're wanting to move through their life, and not trying to save, because the experience that people are going through could be the very thing that is helping them become the very best that they're going to be. But absolutely being there with love, and with kindness, and asking people what they need, rather than just going in and doing things without their permission, and without behaving in a respectful way to them. So I think really looking at the way that we behave around that drama triangle, and moving outside of that triangle, is being an adult, taking full responsibility and ownership for who we are in our relationships, and how we behave, and knowing that that is a direct consequence on the relationships around us. How can we improve our intimate relationship with our partner? Are there honest conversations that need to be had? How can we improve the relationships that we have with our friends, and make more time for those as well? So I have 5 top tips for relationships, and the first is self-love and acceptance, because really the work always has to be done internally, and looking at us loving who we are and accepting who we are fully and wholly with love, allows us to then have very loving relationships around us, and it allows us to do our healing work where things are coming up and presenting, we can look at healing those. The second is forgiveness of ourselves, forgiveness of the way we communicate with ourselves, the way we give ourselves a hard time, our internal critic and self-criticism, and really forgiving that judgment that we've had of ourselves and letting it go. And also forgiveness of others. Forgiveness or holding on to resentment and holding on to bad feeling is only doing ourselves damage, and it feeds into all of the other relationships that we have around us. So it's really, really important that we find a way to be able to forgive, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy. It might be incredibly hard. It doesn't mean we have to forget the thing that might have happened, but it does mean that we don't hold on to it and we let it go and move forward. It doesn't mean that we need to tell the person that we're forgiving, and it doesn't mean we have to be their friend, but it does mean that we're not going to hold on to that baggage and take it forward anymore. The third is letting go of judgment. Judgment is incredibly damaging. It's something that we all do. We judge ourselves and we judge others, and we really only judge others because we're basing it on the judgment that we have of ourselves. We become incredibly critical of ourselves and all of those around us, and really that's not coming from a loving state. It's not coming from a state of kindness and of empathy and of being there, and we can't expect to have healthy relationships when they're ones of judgment. So looking at the way that we judge, looking at that internal dialogue that goes around, and what we the way that we have these judgments of other people, and actually forgiving them, forgiving ourselves for judging ourselves, and forgiving ourselves for judging other people around us as well. And so that we can slowly start to have a judgment awareness and start to see where our judgments come up and then let them go. And that makes for a much healthier person ourselves, and therefore much healthier relationships around us. Step 4 is treat people as you expect to be treated. So often I think women can be known for talking behind each other's back and being critical, but not really being honest, not saying what we really think, not telling people what we need and taking ownership for that. And that is so very important, that we in our relationships expect to be treated, or treat people as we expect to be treated, and that's with kindness, with love, with understanding. And if we're not happy in a relationship, that we say why we're not happy, and we tell people what it is that we need. So we don't just have expectations. There's a brilliant quote that says that expectation is the biggest killer of divorce, and I just love that, and I think it's the biggest killer of all relationships, isn't it? It's if we have these expectations, but we're not communicating them, we don't tell people what we want, how on earth are people supposed to know? So without doing things behind people's back, just actually being really, really honest, being really truthful, saying what we need, and and making sure that those expectations are understood and that we're clear, so that we can have healthy relationships around us. And the final thing is having boundaries. So often the women that I work with are not very good at saying no. We say yes to everything because we want to be liked, and we want to make sure that we're pleasing other people. And that's a really old familial and ancestral behaviour, where we've been taught that we need to say yes to be liked, but it's just not true. And no is absolutely a full sentence. We don't need to say yes to everything. And actually it's empowering for you to say no, for you to stand as you are in your own power and say, actually, I'm not able to do that, or I can't do that, or I don't want to do that. And that's really important. So I think having boundaries, saying no when you don't want to do something, and also just receiving compliments and saying thank you to people when people help you, or receiving help and allowing help in too. And I think actually I said 5 points, but I've got a sixth point here, and that is knowing that not all relationships walk the full length of our lives, and that's okay. It's healthy for people to come into our lives and for us to actually let go of people. If they're longer term relationships, if they're our partners, our marriages, then for sure they require work, and it's like a garden, isn't it? It requires gardening and weeding and putting lots and lots of effort and lots of work in. But also relationships take being honest and saying when things are not working anymore, when they are done, when they're not going to go the full length. And I think so often we stay stuck in things because we don't know what else to do. And I think that's the same with friendships outside of our intimate relationships as well. It's okay to say, do you know what? I'm not sure how this relationship is serving either of us moving forward. How can we make sure that we're both enjoying each other's company and support each other? And is this relationship right moving forward? And these are really difficult conversations to have, but ones that are very, very beneficial in us having healthy, solid relationships that support us in our lives and in living a life filled with passion and purpose and getting to where we want to.